So today's video, I never really know how to do these in order. I don't really know whether or not to start, with how I was first diagnosed with my condition, or whether or not I should perhaps explain what my condition is. But for some reason today, I just thought I'd share kind of what it's like living with a chronic disease like mine, which is primary sclerosing cholangitis, with an overlapping disease called autoimmune hepatitis. So a lot of people live with autoimmune diseases, and a lot of people live long and happy lives. But it's a little bit different for me because I actually watched my mother die from an autoimmune disease. So I'm just going to talk for a little bit today about what it's like having lived through that and then being diagnosed just a few years after with my own autoimmune disease and how that sort of affected me. So when I was 15 years old, I remember it very, very vividly. I was sitting on my mom's bed. We were actually playing a board game, Life. And about halfway through the board game, my mom complained that she had a headache, which wasn't uncommon. My mom had lived with migraines most of her life. Usually she just took a shot, fell asleep, and when she woke up, she'd usually feel better. But that particular day, things were a little bit different. After we put up the board game, I asked my mom if I could go hang out with a friend. And while I was gone, I got a call from my stepfather telling me that he had to take my mother to the ER. So I knew there was something up, but I was 15 years old. There wasn't much that I could do at the time. I couldn't drive to go see her or anything. So I just continued staying at my friend's house. The next day, my stepdad told me that they had to take my mom back to the ER because the migraine didn't dissipate, and they decided to admit her. From that point on, it was about a 6-month process of my mom being in the hospital, the migraines increasing, turning into fevers, ultimately until one day she had a grand mal seizure, at which point it was like my mom wasn't there anymore when I saw her. It was very, very hard for me to deal with at the time. But my family sort of helped me through that, and I continued to try to stay by my mom as much as possible thanks to my family. I got to see her most every day. It was the summertime, and I was always there right beside her in the hospital. From hospital to a rehabilitation clinic when we thought she'd get a little bit better, and then back to the hospital until ultimately it came a day where my family had to decide to pull the plug. And that was really, really hard for me because I watched as my mom took her final breaths. So I fell into this sort of depression after that. And then I was diagnosed perhaps a year later because I lost an incredible amount of weight. I think I lost around 60 pounds. I was 100 pounds at 6 foot tall, very, very sick, when I was diagnosed with my first disease, autoimmune hepatitis. And I remember the day that the day the doctor told me autoimmune disease. And I immediately thought, this is the same disease my mom had. I'm going to die from it. And, just with education and my family being there saying, this isn't the same thing, this isn't the same thing, things are different. Finally, I began to believe it. But it's always there in the back of your head, unfortunately. Slowly, I figured out, over time, I had another condition, primary sclerosing cholangitis. More of my mom's autoimmune disease attacked her vascular system. My autoimmune disease attacks my liver. So there are differences there. And just now I think, what's it like living today, living every day with my disease, is that I'm constantly thinking about the fact that one day maybe I'll need to be in the hospital like that. Or, the hospital bills that come from that. Do I have a support system that could care for me the way my family cared for my mother? Living down here in Florida, it's very, very different because my whole family's back home in Kentucky. All these things are constantly, on my mind. But fortunately, like I've posted in other videos, I try to be an optimistic guy. I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm, trying to live my life despite that. it kind of pushes me to live life a little bit more fully, and in some ways. But I don't share these stories or my health disease to get any sort of pity, just to sort of let people understand my reasoning behind some of the things I do. That's why I'm so ambitious in certain areas. That's why sometimes when people say certain things, it triggers me, and I become, scared very, very quickly. When people say my eyes turn yellow, it freaks me out, because that's one of the first signs that my liver's failing, or things like that. I don't want this video to go on forever, but I wanted to sort of share a little bit of my story about what it's like living with an autoimmune disease, having watched my mother pass away from an autoimmune disease. But, hopefully I'll keep making these videos. Other people will see them and realize, like, we're not alone, we're together. I have a huge support group, thank God. Either online communities or family, friends. I work down here at Walt Disney World and have a huge community there. But, hopefully you guys will see me get healthier and healthier, and hopefully conquer all the goals that I want to one day. But that's all I got for you guys.